everybody, this is Greg Petix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the Petixonian Institute of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to look at Rock and Roll Madness, number 2, I believe. Let me double check on that. Yes, it is. The 2 is very muted in this color scheme. It's from Cosmic Comics, which was an English underground comics publisher in the early to mid 70s. They were one of the few English underground comics publishers who did original material. Many English publishers who did undergrounds would just reprint American stuff. America was kind of like where undergrounds came from. But these guys love the spirit of American undergrounds and try to recreate it in England. I don't think they ever did that well. I never heard of this until just a few years ago. I happened to pick it up. But, and the reason why is it's got a Greg Irons cover. So they reached across the pond and got the great underground cartoonist Greg Irons to do the cover. And I gotta say, though, this cover freaks me out. I don't understand how this cover exists. It doesn't make any sense. If you can see the copyright date, 1974. That's when this comic was published. And it shows this crazy band, which for all intents and purposes is a complete stereotype of punk rock. This guy's got a fucking mohawk. And he's ripping his strings out. Apparently it's like ugly, talentless music. The singer is saying, "I'll mash your cobs, I'll eat your heart. Just say we never gonna part." Just doing like really like punky lyrics. No bands were writing lyrics like that then, I don't think. So I don't understand how this exists. It's almost like Greg Irons looked into the future and predicted punk. Like, who in 1974 would have said, oh yeah, there's going to be bands and the guitarists will have mohawks? And it's just, it's crazy. This cover freaks me out. It's amazingly well drawn. It's like Greg Irons at his height, you know, just doing amazing shit. But I still am so fucking confused how Greg Irons discovered punk before punk was even close to existing. I know there was different kinds of punk. There was the Stooges, there was the New York Dolls at this time. But this could be from 1977. It's so weird to me. It's like the main reason I want to talk about this comic. Actually, that's not true, because this is even more revelatory. The first story in this second issue of Cosmic Comics Rock and Roll Madness Funnies, it's drawn by Dave Gibbons of Watchmen fame. So in 1974, Dave Gibbons is this good. This is years before he started working for 2000 AD. 2000 AD wasn't even around until 4 years later. And Dave Gibbons was drawing for Undergrounds, the English Undergrounds. And he already looks like Dave Gibbons. Look at this art. This is just, yeah, that's Dave Gibbons. This is how he drew in 1982. 10 years later or more, less or more. It's crazy that this shit exists. And this first story, it's written by Geoff Rowley, and Dave Gibbons draws it. And it's the album notes from this rock band called the Electric Angst. I'm sorry, just Electric Angst, because that's how bands were in the early 70s. And they're this bloated, typical rock star band. And it's got like a lot of good gags. It's just talking about their recording session, how all the big stars are trying to, drop in so they can, be a part of the super session, because that was a thing back then. All these celebrities, they mention all these rock stars showing up with their guitars, and this band is just totally nuts. And they, the producers and the engineers are just like, what the hell? And it gets more and more surreal, where, they have 2 orchestras. They've got the Boston Pops and the London Symphony. And because of that, they get a different type of groupies. These old matronly ladies. And a lot of them died during the recording. I mean, that's how over the top this is. They got, it's totally surreal. They bring in this tag team of wrestlers to play organ in a rugby club choir to take over from the female backup singers. They get so sad about the recording, how just foul it is, just terrible. The producer and the engineer play Leonard Cohen songs to try to cheer themselves up. That's how low they are. And they end up killing themselves. So we follow this, it's basically a week or two. And a lot of the band members keep dying. It doesn't matter, though. They just keep recording the funeral services to add to the album as like a concept-y thing. And the album is completed. And they're all dead. It's pretty clever and funny stuff, but more than that, getting to see Dave Gibbons years before he even started working in 2000 AD. I mean, it looks like Dave Gibbons. He already had his shit together in 1974. So bizarre to me. So we got some other random English underground guys. We got Dirty Pussy, which it looks like they were just trying to do Fritz the Cat here. And this cat is a hard-drinking ne'er-do-well. Like Fritz the Cat, but without the great art and without much cleverness. Not that great. But, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's got a decent cartoony style for this cat. And what else do we have? Oh, yeah, then somehow he becomes this interstellar rock star. Because his manager says, I don't care that you can't play an instrument. You got the look. You're going to be the biggest thing in the galaxy. So this cat becomes super huge. And, of course, typical thing happens. He becomes a, total wastrel, doing drugs. And look at this. I kind of like this panel. It's kind of like all these needles. It's almost like it's like a poncho of needles on his body. He's such a drug taker, And finally, to get the ultimate high, some groupie or some friend of the band says, hey, you want to drop some antimatter? And, of course, it blows him up. Fade out to strains of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So this is very of its time. Willie Wankum presents America's latest hardcock band, Butch and the Buttfuckers. And this is drawn and written by J.J. Patagno. He's a pretty good artist, pretty good cartoonist. And it seems like he's just making fun of glam rockers. In the early 70s, it was very trendy for big rock stars and even smaller rock stars to be androgynous, to put on women's makeup, dress like a woman. And this guy's bragging about how he's totally got the look down. He's wearing shiny Lyrics trousers, hugging his skinny ass. And, he's got lipstick in his purse. And he's a pretty good cartoonist. I never heard of this guy until I saw this comic. So he's talking about making himself up gay. And even hanging out at gay bars and doing stuff with guys. Like grabbing guys' cocks in the bathroom. Basically, he wants to make it. He knows that's the trend. But then he goes into this homophobic diatribe. He's like, you better not pinch my ass. And he beats up this guy. And he says, I ain't no fucking homo. I do it for the promo. So I'd like to think that this guy's, being satirical. I hope there's not real homophobia behind this. But he's basically commenting on how all these rock stars were trying to appear gay back then, even though they weren't really. So then we have this band, a story called The Skids. And it's by Mick Farron with art by Edward. Let me double check the contents real quick. I should look on the Comics Joint site. A lot of these are uncredited. And this is just about this totally loser band. And this one guy, he's like the head of the band, and he's just fucking up left and right. He's getting worse and worse. The band kicks him out. He thinks he's going to get royalties from the albums that he created with the band. But of course, there's some managers like, well, actually, if you look at your contract, I get 20% of everything, and you didn't really make a lot. So he starts another band, and the record is great, but the record company refuses to release it. He goes as a solo singer. The record company still kind of cock blocks him. They just don't like him on a personal level. And then he hits the skids, and he dies. But, I'm sorry, there's two choices. We see two paths he could take. He could die, and then, of course, all of his albums will sell great. And there'll be re-releases. And, or he could wait until the revival time comes around again. And we see him in the future. He's an old man. And his time has come again on the revival circuit. This cartoonist isn't very good. This Edward guy. It's not so great. Speaking of not that great art, here's Tales from Grandpa Roach. And this artist is very, whatever. He's not that good. But, he tells the story well. He gets her done. And it's actually a really clever script, though. This is pretty funny, this thing. It's this whole story about this magic guitar that whoever picks it up, even if they have no talent at playing, they can play better than like Hendrix or Clapton. And it, goes from person to person. Everyone who gets to have the magic axe in their possession becomes a star for a little while. And finally, this one guy just jumps up on stage and grabs the magic axe. He's just a goofy punter in the crowd. But, of course, he's amazing because he's got the magic axe. Everyone's like, holy shit, he's better than Hendrix. He's amazing. But then he decides to be like Pete Townsend, and he destroys the magic axe, just like Pete Townsend used to do with his guitars. The myth was over, the legend splintered into a million tiny legendettes. The magic axe was no more. And there's a little moral at the end of the grandpa says, well, all I'm saying is this, there are a lot of guys around not playing like they used to. So basically the magic axe was destroyed, and that's why music wasn't that great after the late 60s. Forgotten Blues Man's Blues. Forgotten Blues Man's Blues. This is Malcolm Poynter with art by Geoff Rowley again. This art is way better than that last story. It's really good cartooning. And it's just this old bluesman. And he's just talking about how every time, he's just sitting on his porch playing his blues. He doesn't really care about being a star, but there's always some manager type, rich white guy will pull up in his car and be like, come on, I'm going to make you famous. And, he goes on these old, the blues circuit, going on like Newport Jazz Festival, that kind of shit. But then he's got all these young white kids who are like, we dig your stuff, man, and we're going to back you on this album. And the manager's like, yeah, you'll sell a lot if we have these hot young musicians backing you. And this old guy just, starts playing his little song, just like he always does on his porch. But then these guys come in with the like, wow, 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 and like just totally wanking all over it. And he's like, what the fuck is this? I'm not liking this. And it's blowing his eardrums out. He doesn't like loud rock music, acid rock, But these guys are all inspired by his old blues, just like all, like Led Zeppelin, all those 60s English bands. So he goes back to his house, and now he's deaf. And so he's playing on his porch. And now he's known as Deaf Boy Jefferson. And once again, a man from the city comes. Some operator. And he just comes up to him, pokes out of his eyes. And now, so we can call him Blind Boy Jefferson. And so it's like one of those things, you know, where a lot of those old blues guys had some infirmity in their name. So he says, yeah, now you can start in the blues package, which was one of those like in the late 60s, early 70s. They had a lot of those like old bluesmen, you know, playing for all these young white kids. They kind of had some cachet. So there's Blind Boy Jefferson. And they just have this huge list of the players on this blues package. And they're kind of funny. They're just ridiculous. They got like Screen Door Willie and Limpin' Wolf and the Mississippi Mud Shufflers, Little Mute Luke. I'm trying to find some other ones that are pretty funny. Sick Joe Carter and Nurse Liza. These are pretty funny, I think. Maybe you won't think so. But, you know, like I love all this old blues stuff, and he kind of gets the names right. This guy obviously is a fan of this music. And One Arm Calhoun. Trying to find other good ones. The Late Sonny Tux. This guy's actually dead. He's not just infirm. Skysick Davies. So there's some great cartooning and some pretty good satire of the whole, like, that blues revival in the late 60s. And here they are at the blues package. They're all trying to one-up each other. And apparently, though, their music is so depressing, they're getting 30 suicides a night from the audience. And, of course, he ends up in a hospital from all this shit. He's blind and he's deaf. You can't even hear that his dog's there. He's like, my dog must have died, even though the dog is going woof. But he's blind and deaf. And he's singing a song about it. I'm back from the city and strumming in my cot. Fame deafed and blinded me, so I'm trying to stay forgot. Because he doesn't want to deal with this anymore. Every time he goes out on the road, he gets some kind of, you know, infirmity or illness. Injury. And we have a back cover by J.J. Patagno. He's a pretty good cartoonist. He's got this weird little style. He really likes to draw huge bulges in rock stars with spandex. So that's Rock and Roll Madness Funnies. I'm so sorry that I couldn't tell you this artist of Dirty Pussy because it's not credited, but I will write it in the notes. It's not really worth searching out more of this guy. He's not that great. But, you know, there's worse shit out there. He's not the worst cartoonist I've ever seen, but there's obviously a Fritz the Cat type ripoff. So, yeah, this is, you can definitely find this cheap. Nobody even knows about this comic. I found it in the random box of undergrounds at Excalibur Comics here in Portland. They're one of those classic old stores that still has back issues, and they have like two short boxes of underground comics right on the counter there. And that's kind of rare to find nowadays at normal comic stores. But, you know, I think the guy who started the store was an old hippie, so he respects the undergrounds. And we have a lot of old hippies here in Portland who die off every year, and their families, you know, sell their shit to Excalibur. So I found some really choice stuff in these underground short boxes. So Rock and Roll Madness #2. If anyone has #1, an extra copy, and they want to send it to me, in the notes is my address. I will, I don't know what I'll do for you, but maybe I'll make you a special video, whatever comic you want me to do. But Rock and Roll Madness #2, once again, I hope you liked it, and I'll see you next time at the Petixonian Institute of Comic Book Studies.